everyone, it's Lisa Danforth. We are here live today for Sustainable Leadership Live. I am so excited to have my guest with me today, Veronica Williams, who I've known for years. She's going to be talking about epic leadership traits and how they build trust. But before we jump in and she starts sharing her brilliance and her expertise about all of it, and her business as well, Unbroken Leadership. I can't wait to hear more about that, Veronica. What I really want to do is just give you a little bit of information about her experience and why she's here chatting. So Veronica is the creator of Unbroken Leadership. She's a 25-year marketing professional who's had a successful career helping other people grow their businesses. She has bought, run, and sold a small advertising agency where she helped some of Vermonters' most recognized brands grow their business. And today she's going to be talking about building trust with your teams through epic leadership traits. Welcome, 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 Veronica.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. And I'm so excited about it because, we've been talking for a little bit and I actually just finally, I've been working on Unbroken Leadership for a while. And, I've recognized for a long time that there are common threads between good leadership and least resistance horse training. But I just came up with the acronym finally of epic leadership traits. And so this is like the first time where I'm really presenting it to the world. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. Thank you.
The unveiling. Tell us more about what it is that you do. You utilize horses, right, in order to bring in those traits, to build boundaries, to understand boundaries, empathy. I've spoken with a few people who do this type of training. It doesn't seem like there's a lot, but with leadership, I love the connection and it's so cool. If you'll share a little bit about it.
So the goal is to use horses to help people learn to develop epic leadership traits. And those traits are empathy, predictability, integrity, and curiosity. We can talk more about that. But the reason I find working with horses so helpful is that they give really authentic feedback, right? And it's instantaneous. And one of the things that's amazing to me is when you're working with a horse, it doesn't matter what kind of horse it is. If you're empathetic and you see what's going on with that horse and you make a change in your behavior, it can change that horse's behavior almost immediately. And when you do that with people, it's not that immediate, right? Because they hold on to baggage differently. They have agendas, they have guile. So you don't necessarily get the same kind of response. And so it's easy to get discouraged, right? You're working on all these management, leadership development skills, and you're practicing with people, but you're not getting a response. And you're like, well, it must be the wrong thing. And it's not. It just takes longer to get that desired outcome with people than it does with horses.
Which seems like it is so important that we start leaning into this. Given the Great Resignation, there's so much conversation about that we need to start leaning into all of those, the epic leadership traits that you have, so that we can retain and bring on new team members. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, so that's really interesting because I was reading a post on LinkedIn yesterday about how the tech industry is experiencing, a really difficult time retaining their top talent. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about stock options and how that always used to work and it doesn't work anymore. And it's like, well, why would you think that what worked to attract talent pre-COVID is going to work to attract talent post-COVID? And right, that's also why I really, empathy and curiosity are so important to me. And we'll talk more about predictability and integrity, but you have to stay curious about what's happening with your workforce because they're dynamic, right? And you can't just say, okay, so we're going to offer stock options and 401k, and then we think we're going to attract the top talent in the 25 to 35-year-old age range. That's ridiculous. That's not what they want anymore. They want flexibility and work hours, and they're probably more interested in healthcare than they are in a 401k. So, right, you have to think about what do they want? And if you're not curious, how are you going to find out? So, that's why those things are so important. What is really interesting is when we first moved to Texas, I did do a demonstration of Unbroken Leadership. And one of the things that you were talking about, how do you find the next hire? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's interesting to me is I was working with a group of managers and we were talking about the different types of horses that we were working with that day and how, if you're in succession planning, you're going to want a different type of hire than you are if you're in, you're at the long haul stage, right? So, or if you're growing, or if you're thinking about, downsizing, the type of person you want working for you is going to be different. And that was one of the biggest aha moments for the people who participated in my demonstration was, oh, I hadn't really thought about that, right? Like, I don't want a type A person if I'm here for 20 years, right? Because a type A person is going to push you out. They're going to push you up and out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things I also love about it is you will work with different types of horses, and they all bring something different to the table.
So can we back up just a little bit and for you to share a little bit more about the horses? We're talking about, teams coming in and what it can do, but can you just share a little bit for those who have never heard of this before so that they can understand, have a little more of a foundation for the work that you do?
Well, so one of my goals for Unbroken Leadership is to eventually use retired performance horses. And the reason for that is because, in dressage, in eventing, they will use their horses almost their entire life. But in speed events like gymkhana, barrel racing, or even, track racing, once the horse is past its peak, they're not necessarily cherished anymore. Mm-hmm. So my goal is to actually use retired performance horses. And, again, when you say, tell me about the horses, one of the things that I'm working on is I want to come up with something very similar to the color code, but to talk about horses, because, right, empathy is about understanding the partner that you're working with. And horses have personalities just like people. You can have horses that have a very high flight response, who have a very high fight response. I've actually been working with someone who has a horse who has a very high fight response. And that is, I probably won't be the person working with that horse anymore because I'm not a professional trainer. And those horses can be really dangerous if you don't learn how to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
And
same thing with the teams, right?
Same with the team. And that's the thing, right? It's also, I can remember when I first started riding, I thought I can ride anything. And then after I broke my back, I realized the greatest skill I can have is learning what horse I can ride. And I think that's true in leadership, right? There are going to be times where you're going to find someone and it's not going to be a good fit. And learning how to manage that relationship to the best end is also part of good leadership.
So talk more about the connection between you working with teams, say. Why working with a horse is going to help a team with their epic leadership traits and really build that trust within the team. What is that real connection? So
there was a video I saw, it was like in 2004 or 5. And it was this guy who had trained his horses to come running when he cracked his whip. And it really crystallized things for me because I see a lot of people go out to catch their horses and the horses don't want anything to do with them. I see a lot of employees going to work on Monday morning and they're not excited. They're not motivated. And I really believe that is a function of leadership, right? Like if you build trust, if you have good communication, if you're predictable in who you promote and who you don't promote, if you show up with integrity, I think all of those things create a trusting workforce who will be more motivated and excited to come to work, right? There are horses that are broken and there are horses that are trained. And I want a trained horse. I want a horse that shows up with its ears perked, tail up, ready to go to work. Mm-hmm. And you develop that with trust and respect. And I think it's the same with employees. And so that's the connection for me.
So let's say we've got a leader who has a team and he's cracking the whip and they're like, oh, I don't think so. Right. So they reach out to you. She reaches out to you. What is it that you would do to help them build trust within their team, within the work with the horses?
So the first thing that I would do actually is teach them about what effective communication is in a horse-human relationship. And that is where, again, it starts to push into empathy, because you have to start looking at, okay, what are the cues that I'm getting when I'm having a communication? one of the things that I find really interesting is, and I've seen a lot about this on LinkedIn, when your workforce stops engaging with you, that's a really loud signal that you're doing something wrong. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the employer starts having even worse communications. So if you're working with a horse and you're pulling and pulling and pulling, the horse is pulling back and pulling back and pulling back. And so what you have to start doing is getting curious about, okay, how do I get the performance that I want? And again, it's about asking questions. It's about being curious. And I think one of the things that is interesting, I once saw Chris Irwin speak, and he's written some really great books about this topic. And he really, one of the things that he talks about is how, most of us, eyes front, predators, right? And we look at leadership that way. It's very much about, right, like winning, dominating, right? It's very
It
eye
has
forward.
been, definitely.
It has been.
Hopefully
But,
it's-
when you start thinking more about how prey animals lead, it's right, like monkeys, when a new male takes over their group, he throws out all the babies, right? That's not what happens with horses. Yeah, they don't like to have the previous male's
That's just not
progeny. It's not nice, but it's pretty common. And right, so the way herds work is very, very different. It is leaders in a herd are responsible for the safety of that herd. And I think if more leaders thought about leadership as a service position than a power position, we'd all be in a much better place.
How would you start with, if someone were to reach out to you and just say, I'm really struggling with my team. I've tried all sorts of stuff. I've even hired people to fix them. I've heard that one before. I just need them to, can you just get them to do something? But they're reaching out to you. How do you start working with them? And are you working with them? Are you bringing in the teams? Just for those who
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So, Unbroken Leadership is in its nascent stages. I am just kind of figuring all this stuff out. But in that particular situation, I would actually want to work with that person with a couple different types of horses. And the reason I say that is because, I think you can find out a lot about a person about how when you see how a horse responds to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. My husband Pierce, and he's a great guy, and he is a television producer, and they call him Sarge, right? Because he is all about like, let's get this done. When I'm going to an event, if I'm running a little bit late, Pierce will go out into the field to catch my horse for me. And it's always upsetting because I know we're going to be out in the field a lot longer than if I went out to catch the horse. And it's because Pierce doesn't really do a good job of taking the pressure off, right? Like he's always so task focused. And that's actually not an uncommon thing for men in general, right? Like they're very much like, I have a goal to accomplish. I'm going to accomplish that goal and then I'm going to move on to the next thing.
But what I'm hearing is that drive, that focus is actually pushing what it is that they want further away.
Yes.
Whether it's the horse, whether it's with their team.
Yep, exactly. And so again, that's why it's good to put them with a couple of different types of horses, because they're going to say they're going to be the thing that tells you what you need to work on. Because, again, I have two horses that are very, very different. One is type A, high drive, right? Like always pushing. And that horse, if you're too aggressive with him, if you're too, right, like you are going to get a really bad response. And he has a very high flight response, thank goodness, because he'll just start running away. But you'll see his head will get higher. He'll get more anxious. He'll have a negative reaction to that. My other horse, Cranrock, he's super chill. I mean, if he was a human being, he would be a complete stoner. He likes to have fun. He's got a sense of humor. He'll give you 80% all the time. I'm sorry?
The dude, let's just hang out.
He is totally that. And so right then it's interesting to see how he responds to somebody like that, because again, what ends up happening sometimes is, they'll ask and he won't respond. And then they'll ask way too hard, way too fast. Mm-hmm. And then again, you'll get a negative response. So, in that particular circumstance, I may not want to work with that person in a team setting. I may want to work with them one-on-one and just give them the opportunity to be around a couple of different horses to find out, okay, where's the issue? Because again, it's really telling.
So what I'm really hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, just that working with an individual leader with the horses, because they are so instantaneously reactive, it shows where the leaders are struggling, that they're just not aware of, that's getting in the way of their team trusting them leading their team, probably even retaining their team and their employees.
Yeah.
Because the horses are so responsive. I find that so absolutely fascinating. I just want to say, if you're watching this live, or if you're on the replay and you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Veronica will answer them. And if it's on the replay, we'll just tag her and make sure she pops in and answers them, because there's so much to learn about this in a way that we're not trained to do, right? That we're not, it's so subtle, but so powerful.
It's really amazing because my barrel horse is 21 years old now, and at one point he developed ulcers, and that horses do have a memory, right? They're pretty forgiving, but they don't forget much. And because he had ulcers, he learned to buck while being tacked up because it hurt. Mm-hmm. And when I was trying to work on him to help him get over bucking, I was working with someone, and they were very good about saying, it's not about what you've done up to this point. It's about what do you want to do now. And
can you repeat that?
Yeah, it's not about what you've done up to this point. It's about what you want to do about it now. And that, I think, is also really important, is because you can change, right? You can change the relationship. You can change the expectation. And what it requires is you showing up. And remember, I was talking about, when you pull on a horse, they pull back. And it's right, like when there's nothing to pull against, they stop pulling. Mm-hmm. So, that's another thing that I think a lot of times, leadership isn't about pulling, right? It's about directing. And again, it's a really great thing to see when you're working with horses. And actually, I'm really mad at myself because I should have been outside with my horses so we could see what that looks like. Because
I just want to say, Veronica was saying before we jumped on, she doesn't have any videos right now, but she's going to be creating them. So please follow her on LinkedIn. She's going to be posting how she works with horses, how she works with people, and the impact of it. So definitely follow her so you can check out learn more about her work and the impact of it. So sorry, I just wanted to interject that there, Veronica.
That's okay. Great.
So we are coming up on about 18 minutes. We've got a couple more minutes. You had mentioned, we haven't really chatted much about predictability. Can you share a little bit about predictability?
Yeah, predictability. So one of the things about predictability with horses, and, at first I was thinking it's more about consistency, but it's not really, because when you are training a horse, when you're just starting to work with them, the cue that you use is applied in the same place, but it's not applied in the same way over time, because when you're first training, you have to kind of start soft, and it's another great saying, be as soft as you can be, but as hard as you have to be. And so if you don't get a response with a soft cue, you have to make it louder, right? But the goal is that because it's predictable, right? You start soft and you get louder. The horse learns, I don't like loud. I'm going to respond at soft. That's how you get your horse to become soft. In leadership, predictability is important because, and this is one of the things that I've seen so much in leadership, and it's so sad, is when you have if you're a leader and you have a good individual contributor, one of the things that you have a tendency to do is give that good individual contributor more work. And if you have a poor individual contributor, what you have a tendency to do is take work off of their plate and give it to the good individual contributor because they'll get it done. That's not predictable. And the reason it's not predictable is because what ends up happening is the person who's a poor contributor is making the same as the good contributor, but doing less. Mm-hmm. So you have good contributors who are working harder because that's how they're built, that's how they're made up, that's how they're driven, that's what motivates them as success and accomplishment. And you have poor individual contributors who are like, relaxed, having a great day because they're not really doing much. That's not predictable. And that's bad for the herd. That's bad for the herd mentality. So that's why predictability is so important in leadership.
So true. So true. So thank you. So I have a question. We're just about at time here. So I would love to know, what habit or skill set, what is it that you do to help you live and lead a sustainable life and business?
Well, this may not be surprising, but it's spend time with my horses. I recently presented at a very weird event, but one of the reasons that I think I was there is because I often say I never feel closer to God than when I'm on the back of a horse. And it's not just on the back of them, right? Like grooming them is so relaxing and so comforting, and training them. So, it is, for me, it is working with horses that helps me find centeredness and peace and grounding. And that is what makes it easier for me to show up curious and empathetic, predictable, and with integrity. So, I mean, like I said, it's no big surprise, right?
No, it's not. And it's just the power of it, again, is just so incredibly impactful. So if someone wants to learn more about you, the work that you do, they are struggling with their team, they're lacking trust and therefore probably accountability as well with their teams, and they want to, nothing seems to be working. They're like, love this conversation. How can they reach out to you? Where can they find you? Is it a social media platform or?
So I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and it's vjwilliams.marketing is my LinkedIn handle. Also, I do have a website for Unbroken Leadership. You can find me there. It's unbrokenleadership.com. I am working on getting my email set up. There's something funky going on with that, but I will post that in both places if you want to reach out to me that way.
Yeah, but definitely connect with Veronica. Mention that you saw her here on LinkedIn so she knows where it is that you're coming from. And that's a great way to start the conversation and learn more about her work. So, Veronica, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate having me on.
Yeah. And next week, I have Shannon Hughes. She's going to be talking about building yes and through improv, applied improv. I just think that's so fascinating. I can't wait to hear about it. That's going to be March 16th. Again, Shannon Hughes is going to be joining us at 10 o'clock East Coast time. That will be posted soon, so be sure to register. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Have a good day.